in his breast. But when he came up to the man who stood on the edge of the gravel path upon a low pedestal, he was absolutely thunderstruck. "Surely it can't have been that one who beckoned to me," thought he, for he saw that the entire man was made of wood. He stood there and stared at him. He was a thick set man on short legs, with a broad, ruddy countenance, shiny black hair, and a full black beard. On his head he wore a wooden hat, on his body a brown wooden coat, around his waist a black wooden belt. On his legs he had wide wooden knee breeches and wooden stockings, and on his feet black wooden shoes. He was newly painted and newly varnished, so that he glistened and shone in the moonlight. This undoubtedly had a good deal to do with giving him such a good natured appearance, that the boy at once placed confidence in him. In his left hand he held a wooden slate, and there the boy read: "Most humbly I beg you, though voice I may lack, come drop a penny, do but lift my hat." Oh, ho! The man was only a poor box. The boy felt that he had been done. He had expected that this should be something really remarkable. And now he remembered that grandpa had also spoken of the wooden man, and said that all the children in Karlskrona were so fond of him. And that must have been true, for he, too, found it hard to part with the wooden man. He had something so old timey about him that one could well take him to be many hundred years old, and at the same time he looked so strong and bold and animated, just as one might imagine that folks looked in olden times. The boy had so much fun looking at the wooden man that he entirely forgot the one from whom he was fleeing. But now he heard him. He turned from the street and came into the churchyard. He followed him here too. Where should the boy go? Just then he saw the wooden man bend down to him and stretch forth his big, broad hand. It was impossible to believe anything but good of him, and with one jump the boy stood in his hand. The wooden man lifted him to his hat and stuck him under it. The boy was just hidden, and the wooden man had just gotten his arm in its right place again, when the bronze man stopped in front of him and banged the stick on the ground so that the wooden man shook on his pedestal. Thereupon the bronze man said in a strong and resonant voice: "Who might this one be?" The wooden man's arm went up so that it creaked in the old woodwork, and he touched his hat brim as he replied: "Rosenbom, by your majesty's leave. Once upon a time boatswain on that man of war, Dristigheten. After completed service, sexton at the Admiral's church, and lately carved in wood and exhibited in the churchyard as a poor box." The boy gave a start when he heard that the wooden man had said "Your Majesty." For now, when he thought about it, he knew that the statue on the square represented the one who had founded the city. It was probably no less an one than Charles the XIth himself, whom he had encountered. "He gives a good account of himself," said the bronze man. "Can he also tell me if he has seen a little brat who runs around the city to night? He's an impudent rascal. If I get hold of him, I'll teach him manners." With that he again pounded on the ground with his stick, and looked fearfully angry. "By your majesty's leave, I have seen him," said the wooden man, and the boy was so scared that he commenced to shake where he sat under the hat, and looked at the bronze man through a crack in the wood. But he calmed down when the wooden man continued: "Your majesty is on the wrong track. That youngster certainly intended to run into the shipyard and conceal himself there." "Does he say so, Rosenbom? Well, then, don't stand still on the pedestal any longer, but come with me and help me find him. 4 eyes are better than 2, Rosenbom." But the wooden man answered in a doleful voice: "I would most humbly beg to be permitted to stay where I am. I look well and sleek because of the paint, but I am old and mouldy and cannot stand moving about." The bronze man was not one of those who like to be contradicted. "What sort of notions are these? Come along, Rosenbom." Then he raised his stick and gave the other one a resounding whack on the shoulder. "Does Rosenbom not see that he holds together?" With that they broke off and walked forward on the streets of Karlskrona, large and mighty, until they came to a high gate which led to the shipyard. Just outside and on guard walked one of the navy jack tars, but the bronze man strutted past him and kicked the gate open without the jack tar's pretending to notice it. As soon as they had gotten into the shipyard, they saw before them a wide, expansive harbour, separated by pile bridges. In the different harbour basins lay the warships, which looked bigger and more awe inspiring close to, like this, than lately when the boy had seen them from up above. Then it wasn't so crazy, after all, to imagine that they were sea trolls, thought he. "Where does Rosenbom think it most advisable for us to begin the search?" said the bronze man. "Such an one as he could most easily conceal himself in the hall of models," replied the wooden man. On a narrow land strip, which stretched to the right from the gate, all along the harbour, lay ancient structures. The bronze man walked over to the buildings with low walls, small windows, and a conspicuous roof. He pounded on the door with his stick until it burst open, and tramped up a pair of worn out steps. Soon they came into a large hall which was filled with tackled and full rigged little ships. The boy understood without being told that these were models of the ships which had been built for the Swedish navy. There were ships of many different varieties. There were old men of war, whose sides bristled with cannon, and which had high structures fore and aft, and their masts weighed down with a network of sails and ropes. There were small island boats with rowing benches along the sides. There were undecked cannon sloops and richly gilded frigates, which were models of the ones the kings had used on their travels. Finally, there were also the heavy, broad, armour plated ships, with towers and cannon on deck, such as are in use nowadays, and narrow, shining torpedo boats, which resembled long, slender fishes. When the boy was carried around among all this, he was awed. "Fancy that such big, splendid ships have been built here in Sweden!" he thought to himself. He had plenty of time to see all that was to be seen in there, for when the bronze man saw the models, he forgot everything else. He examined them all, from the first to the last, and asked about them. And Rosenbom, the boatswain on the Dristigheten, told as much as he knew of the ships' builders, and of those who had manned them, and of the fates they had met. He told them about Chapman and Puke and Trolle, of Hoagland and Svensksund, all the way along until 1809. After that he had not been there. Both he and the bronze man had the most to say about the fine old wooden ships. The new battleships they didn't exactly appear to understand. "I can hear that Rosenbom doesn't know anything about these new fangled things," said the bronze man. "Therefore let us go and look at something else, for this amuses me, Rosenbom." By this time he had entirely given up his search for the boy, who felt calm and secure where he sat in the wooden hat. Thereupon both men wandered through the big establishment sail making shops, anchor smithy, machine and carpenter shops. They saw the mast shears and the docks, the large magazines, the arsenal, the rope bridge, and the big discarded dock, which had been blasted in the rock. They went out upon the pile bridges, where the naval vessels lay moored, stepped on board and examined them like two old sea dogs, wondered, disapproved, approved, and became indignant. The boy sat in safety under the wooden hat, and heard all about how they had laboured and struggled in this place, to equip the navies which had gone out from here. He heard how life and blood had been risked, how the last penny had been sacrificed to build the warships, how skilled men had strained all their powers in order to perfect these ships, which had been their fatherland's safeguard. A couple of times the tears came to the boy's eyes as he heard all this. And the very